Good afternoon, good day, everyone. Greetings of solidarity. I am Carol Gian Antonio Galang, Senior Program Officer of the Asian Democracy Network. For everyone's information, we are live streaming in ADN's various social media accounts. For those who want to know, ADN is a regional organization working towards protection and promotion of democracy in Asia. As part of that mandate is to track regional trends which impact the region's democratization processes. This discussion is part of ADN's democracy updates, meant to inform stakeholders regarding regional situations and create platforms that encourage dialogue and intersectional discussions. The first iteration of our democracy update brings us to Indonesia, where the threat of militarized governance slowly creeps in. And this rightfully worries pro-democracy stakeholders. President Prabowo Subianto was proclaimed as Indonesia's eighth president after a contentious general elections held in February 2024. Prior to his election, military man Prabowo was known to be a fiery-tempered nationalist and hardliner, serving as former President Jokowi's defense minister and as Suharto era Special Forces commander. Enjoying tremendous popularity and a majority support from the country's powerful legislative chamber, the Dewan Perwakilan Rakyat, or the House of Representatives, the now President Prabowo is poised to dramatically shape Indonesia's political landscape. Pro-democracy stakeholders are worried that democratization efforts might get derailed, given that the eighth president inherits an Indonesian government with weakened checks and balances and a tendency to sideline human rights accountability. So, barely half a year in office, the president effectively expanded the armed forces role in his government, appointing military officials to key government posts and to lead critical projects. In a bold move on March 20, 2025, the president's allies in the legislature passed a law broadening the military's role beyond national defense. The content and impact of Indonesia's revised military law in Indonesia's democracy will be our point of discussion for today. In addition, we have invited our speakers who will join to track other proposed policies by the Prabowo government that would upset and undermine checks and balances in Indonesia's fragile and stagnating democracy and usher in greater militarized governance in the country. Ultimately, we will be providing recommendations on how pro-democracy stakeholders can respond in proposed ways to protect democratic institutions amid expanding military influence in Indonesia's democratic space. We have a discussion here, which will happen in a panel format. Joining us are among the most recognized human rights and democracy advocates in the country. Mr. Daniel Awigre joins us, the Executive Director of the Human Rights Working Group. With us as well is Professor Bivitri Susanti, the Deputy Chair and Lecturer of Indonesia's Juntera School of Law. And joining us later on is Mr. Muhammad Isnur, the Executive Director of Indonesia Legal Aid Foundation. So to start with our conversation, I would like to call on Mr. Daniel Awigre to provide us with the basic information on what this revised law is all about and how will it impact the democracies, the Indonesia's democratic space, looking at the recent trend of militarization happening. Mr. Daniel, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm very honored to be here. Thank you so much, moderator Karel, and ADN for having me here. I would like to also gratitude that it is a good occasion for Indonesian civil society calling for solidarity, regional solidarity across fellows in Asia, as well as, of course, hopefully we can also extend and deepen democracy together. As mentioned by the moderator, I'd like to give you a brief update about what's going on in Indonesia. Of course, later on, there will be another amazing panel share with me that hopefully it will also complement by them. First of all, I'd like to give me permission to share a slide if possible, because I think I'm still disabled to share screen, or otherwise it will be talking point is also okay. If allow me to share screen a bit so I can be more focused. But my topic is most likely we'll talk about the three things. Of course, the context is the first, and then the second of all about the our agenda on the security sector reform, and then the debate over the civilian supremacy. And last but not least, we'd like to later on to go to the what we can do about in Indonesia as well as in the region. Can we allow share screen now? Okay. So, uh, can you see my slide now? Hopefully, it will be accessible already. Okay. So, as a brief context, what's really happening still last month, yeah, especially on the 20th of March, where the moderator already mentioned that the House of Representatives adopted the revision of law, military law, that it is so much lacking of the participation. It gives the greater role for military trying to deal and get involved in the socio-political Indonesia, exactly as the previous arrangement under Suharto, yeah, or before the Reformation era. So that's also becoming our major concern, especially those who are living and grown up under Suharto. Like myself, as a disclaimer, I grew up and I also born during that time. I know exactly how their habit, the smell of their behavior, of their act, and I do also inherited a traumatic experience where my family or extended family, my grandfather, and also some of my family also become the victim of Orde Baru, ya, or New Order under Soeharto. So for us in Indonesia, civil society, we don't see it is a new things because the new order or Orde Baru or militarization is still there basically. We are never been disappeared. It's always there, and now from reformation it's been shut down a bit, but illegally or informally still happening under Joko Widodo era as a legacy, and now becoming so much legal, yeah, so legalized by Prabowo. So that's why I think my position is basically we don't see that the militarization or military role in Indonesia is out of our politics. Basically, they are still there. So from reformasi and then remilitarization. So first and foremost, of course, we all know. I don't know why my screen cannot really move. So allow me to really share screen, not like this format. I don't know why. I cannot go to the next slide. Wait a minute. Is that okay if I'm using like this? Because otherwise, I cannot really operate my slide properly. Yeah. So then I think Jokowi provide a foundation to normalizing the military roles in civilian affair through some of the president decision, yeah, or perpres, government regulation in some of a civilian role. So giving greater role to some military officer. If we see in the day by day arrangement, for instance, if I'm commuting using train service, there is a military officer in the station. If we watch the football match, for instance, we also now seeing a lot of military staff there. So there is a lot of how do you call that personnel, military personnel is supposed to be are not there, but under Jokowi those legacy under some MOU cooperation between military officers and also some institution, state-owned companies, and so on and so forth are happening everywhere basically. So it means that the military are with us all the time. So of course, I don't. I want to really make it clear that we do not against, or we all of course really agree or accept with the military. But what we want to highlight it here is basically militarization or militarism. Yeah, it is a notion basically that we have to be really clear that based on the basic core or the military norm and values and its organizational characteristic, where it is a monolithic, they don't recognize the opposition. They don't, happy. Maybe they're not really allowing competition. They also characterized as centralistic, really follow the chain of command by the head of the commander. And then military is really focusing on power, basically, including the acceptance in the use of force. By that, I think there has been a clashing of values and norm between uh, militarism and also the core basic norm of democracy. As a civil society, we've been always believing and even harvesting the democratic values and norm, respecting diversities. It is completely opposite with the value of militarism, which is they are so much monolithic. We believe on decentralization, one of our mandate on the reformation, or even we are promoting not really admire on using of force. Even we really giving chance for those who are vulnerable and marginalized or voiceless to be brought up, giving an affirmation action. So somehow in practice, civil society who work on the democratic norm and value is against the militarism. It's not about the military and the process of remilitarization, basically. So militarization can be really seen in the day-by-day basis. If Pak Ical, for instance, ask me, and then I immediately say, "Siap Pak, siap man, I'm ready Pak," in the military way. So a lot of like a kind of militarization happening here and there. So this is the basic concept where we also still inherited as an Indonesian who born and raised under new order under the military government of Suharto back then. They really becoming the ultimate truth, especially to determine about the monolithic interpretation of what is truth under the Pancasila way. So Azas Tunggal Pancasila, one single interpretation of Pancasila is really depending on the interpretation of the state. If we are against with the different interpretation, we can be easily labeled as the enemy of the state. And then you can easily imagine. And it is really frightening situation where we become the enemy of the state. As I mentioned previously, my ancestor, also my relative, also becoming the victim of Orde Baru because they have different perception, they have different opinion. So people, citizen, by this regime, are treated as only an object. They are not subject. They're just object of the development. So that's basically the first thing first that we have to against the revision of Indonesian military law, because it really bring our trauma and experience back where there is almost no room for discussion or debate. Or the question is how we can discuss or debate if there is a gun or weapon on the table. So that's really jeopardizing the principle of egalitarian, equality among actors of democracy. And also, we still also inherited, because of that imposing the excessive use of force, no opposition, and also uh, excessive use of force. We still inherited the Wijitukul case, Munir case, even those already under the Reformation, after Reformation, but Munir also the victim of these kinds of things. And then the student that been shot and like violated, during the protest that's recently or even back then on 1998. And of course, million, maybe the estimation like 3 million human rights victims of 65 gross human rights abuses. So those are some of the, like trauma that now been live up, yeah, by the very short period of, how do you call that, the discussions of military, the revisions of military law. In the democratic society, we believe that military has to be. It's my I'm entering my second point, which is the civilian supremacy. The exercise of force, using of force, of course, by the military in the democratic society, even we allow them to use the the force, yeah, the use of force, but it is only under the civilian governance. It is strictly limited in when, for which purpose, and how. It has to be on the decision of the political decision, democratic decision, which is what we call somehow the involvement of the military operation other than war, or military operation other than war. It's supposed to be under the decision of democratic governance. The revision of this law is really taking out or erasing the participation of the parliament to discuss and to decide whether it is a democratic decision or not, to invite military officers and staff and personnel to deal with the civilian matters. Yeah, so it is really under the government. So military really under the government control and power, basically command, basically. So that's very much missing. That civilian supremacy has been wiped out during this revision. So the military operation other than war, or MOHH, yeah, or Indonesian is the Operasi Militer Selain Perang, ya, UMSP, military operation other than war. That's now is really under the hands of those who are in power, the military. So under Prabowo, it is really strong, yeah, that 14, yeah. Of course, there will be some detail on the 47 article. There are two things that we can later on discuss further, that it is really by the reason of it. The question is that whether militarism is only owned or only lived by the military personnel or not, like Prabowo. The answer is no. Throughout the history of civil and military relation, we have Hitler, Mussolini, and even Jokowi. They trust a lot with the military ways of running and shaping the state. So that's also the problem, that in Indonesia, I think how civil society and also people is really have a contestation among idea how to really effectively running and governing the state. So that's somehow the contestation happening on the ground, where people tends to feeling it's too noisy under democratic things, too too obvious, too a lot of things to be considered. Somehow people have a shortcut, just asking, okay, maybe better we have like a strong man, a strong government. So by us defending democracy as civil society is basically promoting a diversity, uh, respecting diverse voice, consent that's completely uh, different with the core value of military, basically like that. So what's also still missing under reform until this time is that the uh, basic question that why we are still availing is that the reformation of the military court, yeah, that uh, all of laws and framework cannot really regulate and govern military personnel. Military has its own military court, basically. That's something that, they somehow still free in doing anything, and then it will be proceed and decided under their own. So that's basically the idea of the things that we really want to have that, to really reform the military code. So the revision of military law is been there already under the agenda of civil society. But what we aim to have is basically first is removing TNE or military from the politics, establish civilian supremacy, restrict them to defend only to defense or to the defense affairs. Yeah, revision is supposed to be giving strengthening the military to be a professional that free from potential of human rights violation, not play a practical politics, and also not get involved in the business, yeah, and increase professionalism, meaning just only dealing with the state defense against the new threats. This is my last point, yeah. Have we evaluate the law 34 number 34 2024 about military? This is something that we haven't been doing, so we need to really assess the effectivity and things to be improved there. I think we in Joshua agree that focus on the not military not dealing with the business, and then implementing of the TNE on the non-practical in politics. Back then, as I mentioned earlier, on the politics, so one single decision has to be accountable, not violating human rights, and then involvement under the military operation under other than war, and then also let's evaluate their role in the Lemhanas, Wantanas, cyber agencies, and eradicating, deterring threat in international terrorism or transnational crime. That's maybe something that we need to somehow ask them to make some study on it. And we also like challenge them to have a critical analysis on the geopolitical development and the potential war threat in the Asia Pacific or region or beyond, and of course some new threats, new response of hybrid war, cyber war, threaten the sovereign state, study of recommendation, the implementation of TNI, strengthening personal capabilities, and the new threat which need to be covered by the law. So by that, I think enough reason about civil society in Indonesia in rejecting and always against the military law because it gives a greater role of military in the civil and political matters. And then the second of all, it erasing or wiping out the civilian supremacy. And last but not least, it is really a setback from our security sector reform agenda and the military operation and other than war. I thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel, for that context of what the revised military law is all about, and providing us information on that. This is nothing new to Indonesia, but I go now to Miss Bivici Susanti. Miss Bivici, I would like to ask as well, and given we know Mr. Sobianto's how Mr. Sobianto's President Sobianto came into power. Can you provide us additional context on what political conditions led to and enabled the passage of the law? And do you have any idea if there are other policies that are being currently planned that would aggravate militarization in the country? Ms. Bivici, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carol. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, comrades. Very happy to be here. And I will answer Carol's questions later on by also using a little bit of PowerPoint, if I may. And probably it will help us to, it also helps me to deliver what I have to deliver this afternoon. All right, very brief. So yeah, Karel asked me a very important question about the political context on how the the bill actually came into place. By the way, it's not yet a law. We still have to see how it goes. And then also the context of the whole democracy, I would say, in Indonesia. So, although I understand, I listened to Daniel's presentation previously. Let me just briefly give you the context, the brief introduction. What is the military law? And some of my presentation might have been presented by Daniel, but I will skip some parts, but this is just to give me some key points that I have to deliver. First of all, the Indonesian name for the law that we are talking about this afternoon is Undang-Undang tentang Tentara Nasional Indonesia, Law on Indonesian National Military. It's actually a revision to law number 34 of 2004. And by looking at the year 2004, we uh, we will also understand the context when the first military law was drafted. So it was passed by the House of Representatives and the President. Mind you that in Indonesian constitution, the law is made by, how do you call it, by the agreement of the House of Representatives and the military. So it's quite different, for example, with a presidential system of the Philippines. Just an example, because of the system. I mean, Thailand is a different thing because it's a parliamentary system. But in the presidential system, usually the power to make law is on the basically the parliament, right? But in the Indonesian constitution, it's 50-50. Half of the power is on the president and half of the power, the lawmaking power is on the House of Representatives. So it was passed on the 20th of March, as mentioned before. And I used, I was looking for a word that probably can express my anger about the process. So it's utterly incorrect, but I found another English term that might be useful: foul legislative process. So, and then it sparks the protest. Even until now, as we speak, our colleagues, some of our colleagues are now in front of the House of Representatives building in Senayan. They just hang out there. So it's another way of protesting, just to hang out in front of the DPR's building, and they just do daily activities, but in front of the Parliament building. So why the protests came about? In short, of course, rampant militarism, and that's very much related to Karel's question. And also, importantly, it's the road to authoritarianism. So, what is in the law and what not? Well, if we put it very, very briefly, and that's what Prabowo on Monday mentioned in his close meeting with cherry-picked journalists. He always mentioned that, look, there's nothing dangerous about the law. There are only three articles that we revise, which is true if we only look at the text. Now, I believe that my role here is to um, encourage you to look beyond the text. As a lawyer myself, I would strongly encourage you to look beyond the text, because if we only see the text, it's true that there are only three articles revised. The first, and they seem harmless. They seem, very, very minor because, for example, one article is only adding two items to the 14 issues for non-war military operation. operasi militer selain perang, non-war military operation. So there have been, since 2004, there have been a number, 14 issues, but then they added 2 more issues. And they are cyber defense, and the other one is protecting and saving citizens and national interests abroad. Only 2. And then the second one is also only adding 4 to the already there 10 issues, 10 areas that may have active. I purposefully put the italic font there, active military personnel. And the 4 areas are National Anti-Terrorism Agency, Naval Defense Agency, Attorney General's Office, and the Supreme Court. And the third one is changing the age of retirement, which is for us, the civil society, is it doesn't directly affect us, but they will affect the whole, actually, military organization. And we can talk about that later. But again, the law is not only about what is written. We must also understand the historical and political context. They can always argue that, look, we only add 2. But the fact is that there are only more than needed military personnel and military officials in our democratic governance at this time. By 2023, there are 2,569 active military officials in the government. And that is ranging from, I mean, that's the data in 2023. But if you look at our cabinet now, you can see that a number of ministers are active military personnel. So that's already unusual. And also, we also have to look at the fact that Indonesia, in the constitution, still has the military court. It's unfortunately still in the constitution. I say unfortunate because as a constitutional lawyer myself, I would say that it's not a good thing, obviously, to have the military court in the constitution, but that was agreed in 1999 to 2002 constitutional amendment at that time. But so we put it that way, all right. But the problem is then, by having the military court, we have to interpret it that we have to look at the conduct instead of the subject, the legal subject of a crime, for example. So if the conduct falls under criminal code, then everybody, including the armed forces, have to go to armed forces personnel, have to go to the general court. That's the rule of law. But in the Indonesian context at the moment, because they still have not revised the law on military court, if a civilian person and a military personnel conduct the same crime, then the civilian person will go to the general court, whereas the military personnel will go to the military court. And in the military court, they have their own investigators, they have their own prosecutors, and they even have their own judges in the Supreme Court. So this has to be changed, but they have not changed it. And then don't forget that the military personnel is also active in government's projects, like the government's free meal program. Mind you that this is the number 1 in Prabowo's priorities, and then also national strategic projects, which already records a lot of human rights violations, and they are helped and by the military. We can talk about that later, but the situation is that why we have to see the law not only in the text, we also have to see how in reality, the law is needed to legalize what has been happening since at least 10 years ago. And please bear in mind that President Prabowo used to be the Minister of Defense during Jokowi's second period since 2019. So he already spreads the military officials and personnel everywhere, and now they need to legalize that. And I mentioned historical context. Let's just briefly look at the fact that we have dui fungsi ABRI for those who are not familiar with this term. We have dui fungsi ABRI, we call it in Bahasa Indonesia that way, or in English, it's dual function of the Indonesian Armed Forces. And by armed forces at that time, it means Navy, Army, Air Force, and the police. So the dual function of the Indonesian Armed Forces came, to the discourse since 1960s. And please remember that General Suharto, the president, came to power in 1967 with the support of the armed forces, and his power was maintained for 32 years by the armed forces. We call it ABG, the ABRI, the armed forces, bureaucracy, and Golkar. Golkar was now is the party, but it used to be the hands of Suharto in politics. So the fall of Suharto, to cut it short, the fall of Suharto in May 1998, followed by supposedly security sector reform. And our colleagues here, Indonesian Legal Aid Foundation at that time, and then also Impartial and Contras and other human rights NGOs push for the security sector reform. Therefore, the coalition, as Daniel mentioned before, Human Rights Working Group came later on. But since early 2000, civil society has been working on security sector reform. And the reform was conducted by taking out the police from the military, from ABRI, but not much has been done in terms of institutional reform. That's one mistake. And the second mistake is that the main actors are still in politics. Of course, now we can see the result. Prabowo was in the 1998, political context, political situation, but now he's our president. Although he has this track record in terms of the kidnapping of a number of activists. And we also still have General Wiranto also in the scene. And of course, the first president after the reform, after the first president elected by the direct presidential election was actually General Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. And what's the third mistake? It was mentioned before by Daniel as well. We have not been able to deconstruct militarism as habitus. I use this term habitus. Many people say culture, but let's put it as habitus because it's not culture, in a way in the anthropological context, but in the political context is something that we do every day, together with the culture of violence and impunity because of the actors, because the actors are still there. So with that, that's one the text and what's beyond the text is one context. The content is one context, but the second context is the foul legislative process. Then, first of all, there's no meaningful participation. As in any other democratic countries, lawmaking process has to be transparent and participatory, right? In all democratic countries. But what happened lately in Indonesia, I would generalize here because that's one of my main concerns lately. The lawmaking processes in Indonesia has been foul. So, but one example is this particular military law, because it was how do you call it? It was um, conducted in a very rushing way. No, we cannot get any drafts whatsoever. I mean, we could get from WhatsApp group to another, and sometimes we can just call somebody to get the draft, but there is no official publication, not in the parliament website, let alone in the government website, and nothing basically. So, and at some point we were um, um, uh, some high-ranking officials said that the civil society, has been actually spreading hoax because the actual draft is not like what they say. But then we can immediately respond, look, you don't even give us the draft. So how can we, with all good intention, provide you with the correct recommendation? So that's so no participation, so that our colleagues, our friends actually raided the meeting in a very expensive hotel in Jakarta. Of course, it's a closed meeting, so some activists went there and just protested directly, and then they were very much in rush. Just the last day of the the last day before the Ramadan or Idul Fitri holiday in Indonesia, it's a big thing. 1 week before the Idul Fitri, we will have the holiday all nationwide. So they rushed it. Although, as I mentioned in a number of podcasts, look, even if during the Idul Fitri we don't have the revised law, the country will still be here. Nothing will happen. But anyway, they sped that up. So the parliament and the president passed it, but the president has not signed it, and then it's not yet enacted. The deadline is 30 days after the 20th of March. But I'm sure, many are sure that Prabowo will immediately sign this. But that said, because I want to show you that the civil society still have hopes that Prabowo at some point will just stop the law. But in my opinion, that won't happen. So what does it mean? That's the last the last slide. What does it mean to Indonesian democracy? So the first question from Karel, I guess I already answered the political context that made the the law came to our table, and the second one is, what does it mean to Indonesian democracy? Let me remind you that, of course, militarism widens the road to authoritarianism. We can see that in the Democracy Index 2024 for Indonesia is that Indonesia again still in the flawed democracy category, but with even lower rank and lower value. We are still bad in terms of political culture and civil liberty. So I don't want to go in detail in this, but this is just to illustrate that Indonesian democracy is really going down, going towards hybrid regime. Hopefully not, of course, but yeah, we will see. It's going, worse and worse, getting worse and worse. Now we are 6.44. When we reach 6, then we will go to hybrid regime, and then after that we will go to authoritarian regime. But I would also give a note here that these categories this is the index from the Economist Intelligence Unit. I also have some criticisms against these categories, but I just use this to illustrate the worries. Because if we see that electoral process and pluralism, it's still good, 7.92 of 10, but in reality, our colleagues here, Daniel and Isnur, can also share much that in the field, it's not as nice as 7.92. Functioning of government 6.79, yes, functioning, but for whom? For whom is the national strategic projects? For whom is the free meal project? Not for average Indonesians. So lastly, I would like to also touch the issue of shrinking civic space because it's even more shrinking with the militarism that we have now. We have academic freedom actually under threat as well because now the military is very active in entering university lives. So one example is they just signed an MOU with Udayana University in Bali. That's a state university. They have an MOU that they can also provide this class called Bela Negara. How do you call it? State defense. But it's very militaristic. But that's just an example because the MOU with Udayana University, I mentioned this because this just happens, very recently. But even from several years ago, this has been going on in many other universities. And please don't also forget freedom of expression and the fact that the military can also deal with cyber defense. What does it mean by cyber defense? Can we, still have later on webinar like this? We don't know yet. Can we still have open cyberspace like now? We don't know yet. So there are many things under threat, and we can still talk about this later on. And I should end my presentation here so we can have room for discussion. Thank you, Carol. I'm giving back the forum to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Bivitri. So I think the highlight of what Professor Bivitri points out is on the fact that policies like this are dangerous because they pave the way to greater autocratization and militarization of our civic space. And we don't know how it will impact in the future our freedoms of expression and our other fundamental freedoms. But I would like to hear as well from Mr. Isnur. Given the situation, do you have reflections perhaps on how pro-democracy stakeholders can come together and address the spread of militarization and autocratization in our supposedly democratic spaces? So I would like to hear your thoughts as well, Professor Mr. Isnur, on this. So you have the floor. Thank you. Mr. Isnur, are you there? Hello? I think we are having a bit of technical difficulty. So maybe we can, before we resolve, as we resolve this, perhaps we can proceed with some answer questions meant for our panelists at this point. So we'd like to hear from you, our panelists. Is this law? We have some questions here that are raised at this point. So the first question is, excuse me, sorry. Hello, Mr. Sorry, I think we have reconnected with Mr. Isnor. So, Mr. Isnor, were you able to catch up on the question, or if you'd like, you can proceed with the with your intervention as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm sorry I came late here. Just finished the meeting with parliament member. Discuss about procedural code on integrated criminal justice system. So what the question? Sorry, I not here before.
Do you have reflections on how this, laws like this revised military law can impact, democratic spaces? And do you have as well some recommendations on how pro-democracy stakeholders can come together and assist in the protection of Indonesia's democratic space, given the expanding military influence that we are seeing at this point? Yes, Mr.
Yeah.
CEO.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, if you see the Indonesian situation after Reformation era, the reformation of military is not fully reformation. The military still have a big role in many area. So they have a commando territory in province level, in major level until village level. So the army, the military present on many area, on education, on farming, even on they are guiding as like security for marriage party like that. In many area, army is presenting. So the dui fungsi, the two function of role military, it's processing until now. For example, in many area, for example, a lot of MOU, memorandum of understanding between army, between the navy, with a lot of ministerial. For example, a lot of MOU for army have a MOU with Pertamina, the largest industry on oil and company. So when you are seeing in the village, in the many area, army as a guide on, for example, station, train station, on airport. So with this law, we have seen the army and the military have a gaining legitimation with the operation of non-war, because it's all about the military operation non-war, OMSP in the law. And what happened? The military had two area, the dangerous area. The first is about cyber area, and the second one about they pretend to present on multifunction. And the process is danger because before in the previous law, when the military want to have operation non-war, it need permission from the president with cooperation with the parliament. But now the heavy is too heavy for president. President can declare the operation non-war, military operation non-war, only by president. So it's danger because the Prabowo can deliver military operation on war anytime without control, without coordination with a parliament member. For example, before the army want to join task force on declining terrorism, anti-terrorism movement. And the law is mandatory have to the presidential decree press, but because the regulation mandatory have coordination with the parliament, until now the presidential decree is halt. But now presidential decree can declare without the parliament intervention. So it's danger with the situation. When we talk about the aim, this law, Prabowo interview with 6 lead of journalists, we can see the aim of this law. Yeah, they Prabowo want to prolonging the general. So it's not about the holistic problem in military, but it's about the general, about the position, about the number of pension. So yes, we are facing the new generation of dui fungsi, the new generation of militarization in civil area with legitimation from law. And with, for example, also during since 2016 until now, a lot of civil position, yeah, put the general or put the military active and now legitimate by the law. So during the process also we can see a lot of happen. For example, in province West Java, the governor West Java have an MOU with the army in many area, in education, in water, in irrigation system, in apa ya, disciplining the civil servant like that. So we see the future we have a more challenging situation, not only because military role, but we also facing the new situation with the police role. So now we're having a process on uh, parliament member. So the parliament with the government trying to adding the role of police, adding the role of prosecutor without oversight mechanism, how to control them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Isner, for that additional context. Now, I would like to go on to some questions and answer a question from our audiences. And we actually have very interesting questions at this point. And for those who also who want to ask some follow-up questions, we would like to request that you put them in the Q&A panel, and then we'll try our best to answer them. So we have 3 questions here, and perhaps I'll read them all, and I'll ask our speakers to sort of respond to which questions resonate to them. So number 1, we have. I will also not be providing the name of what's called this the ones who provided the question for privacy reasons. Number 1. So this is the first question is, was the amendment of the law already in the pipeline under the current government, or was it an agenda continuation from the previous one? What do you think might have to be allowed? Second question, from where is the real power coming from? From where the real power is coming to Indonesian military? Is there an acceptance of military rulers among the general public? And finally, our third question, what role can civil society, academia, or international partners play in ensuring civilian oversight of the military? So we'll have this first round of questions, and then we'll do another round after our panelists have responded. So we already have some follow-up questions after this. So yes. So perhaps we can go with Mr. Daniel again for your thoughts, and then we'll proceed with Ms. Vici and Mr. Isler. Mr. Daniel, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm missing link the button to press the unmuted one. Thank you so much for the question. Of course, this is our an agenda, yeah. The military law back then enacted back to 2004, and there have been also a lot of changing on the ground, where there are some kind of development that not really governed by that. So there has been always idea to revise, but it is not as an urgent, agenda. While immediately it came so fast, basically. Prabowo, in the interview with the chief of editor in some media outlet recently, last Monday, two of my values panel already mentioned. For him, it is non-issue. By why it is non-issue becoming so fast? It is really basically the intention on trying to regain the military on the civilian arrangement, basically. So greater roles in the politics and civilian affairs, basically. So that's our average. While 3 times, yeah, Prabowo already trying to be the president of Indonesia. So Prabowo not just only this is the first time leading, but he tried several times until now he got the power. So civil society really afraid that this is part of one of the opening gate of many other agendas that we thought it will be easily for them if this particular law enacted now, adopted now, greater literally, because if it is having greater role, so then um, the fear of going back of our previous new order regime, uh, people tends to avoid in dealing with the politics a lot of censorship or censor among people because politics is belong to them. So then and if you really against the politics, then you become the enemy of the state, and it is really uncertain situation. So by that, I guess the other agenda can be easily followed, such as maybe it can be happening that in the end trajectory of this leadership, there has been another agenda, such as the direct appointment of uh, mayor, chief of mayor, or district or provincial level. So there will be no like a election anymore. Or even in the future, they may also how do you call that, selecting president as what a new order uh, has done, which is the appointed by the assembly member, member of assembly. So that's also some agenda that I think it is an opening up the gates of many other agenda that we are fear to happen. Basically, we'd like to really challenge them just because, as I mentioned previously, that it is really erasing or wiping out the civilian supremacy, and it is really uh, jeopardizing the security sector reform that we really push the military to be competent, to be professional, and can also deal with the current challenges, not seeing differences people as their enemy. Basically, that's basically the main issues. And maybe I'd like to correspond with the question number 3, how civil society can do. I think now the student, some university student also try to repeal, try to issues, yeah, the newly revised law to the constitutional court. Is something that so much noble, and we need to support them because the constitutional court is the judge to the things that against the constitution. So that's also one thing that we can do in terms of legal action. And then I think civil society and student and many other actors now is still voicing out their concern, protesting in many ways possible. Like this occasion, I really appreciate at the end and trying to bring up this as a solidarity, how do you call that, sharing, yeah, the regional or international solidarity. And of course, we could also extend the or report, yeah, to the CCPR, maybe the Civil and Political Convention, the committee. I think that's also against the recommendation during our session back to 2023. So, and some other things that we can always do. But I think by that, it also give us a wake up alarm, yeah, to the civil society, not just only Indonesia. I think it's all over on the region. No, hand in hand, stand up together is trying to against, the militarism basically that has three main characteristics, as I mentioned: so much monolithic, centralist, and so much admired to coercion, yeah, or the use of force. That it's really completely opposite with the democratic value, which is respecting diversity, respecting pluralism, even giving the affirmation to the vulnerable group. That's, I guess, things that we can always do together. I stop here. I give other.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Dayan. Miss Mivici, your thoughts on the question.
Thank you, Karel. First question from Andi Suraida. Was the amendment already in the pipeline? It was not. And that's why I said it's really foul process. It's really incorrect, very badly incorrect. It's not. That's why on the slide I put the normal lawmaking process in Indonesia, the 5 steps. The first step is planning. So in Indonesian legal context, first to be discussed, to be put on the table by the parliament, the bill has to be in the priority list of the year. And this law, the revision to the military law, was not in the priority list of 2025. They always argue that, oh, this is because the law was already, as you mentioned, already in the pipeline since the last period. But I should correct that because it's not. In the last period, in the end, in around July, August, September 2024, they wanted to deliberate the military law, but they stopped it because there were also other things in the agenda, things that they need to protect Prabowo's government. Because, for example, they changed the law on the ministries so that Prabowo can have now 48 ministries instead of 34 maximum. That's one example only. But so they put that aside. And actually, in one of the podcasts by Tempo, Bocor Alus Politik, probably you know that by now, in Indonesian participants, that they mentioned that Prabowo himself at that time said, "Stop it now, we do it later on." So they didn't start to deliberate military law in 2024. So they cannot say that it's in the pipeline, so they can immediately put it in the priority list. It's really, the government basically took over the other priority list. And it's illegal, I would say. There's already research from the PSHK, Indonesian Center for Law and Policy Studies, on that. They have some evidence that it's done illegally, basically. So it's not in the pipeline. And what do I think might have prompted this revision to be allowed? Well, I would say it's really, again, I would refer to the report by Tempo magazine that it's allowed by Prabowo himself. So it was Prabowo, General Prabowo, I should mention his title, who wants this law in the first place. And then he ordered one of his closest aides, who is now the Minister of Defense, Shafri Syamsuddin, to take care of that law in February. So they had closed sessions between the government, i.e. the Minister of Defense, with the parliament to start the deliberation of the law without the proper lawmaking process. And then the second question, from where the real power is coming to Indonesian military, I would say it's because of the historical context that I mentioned before. The military in Indonesia has been very strong because our independence was also mainly because of the struggle from the military personnel. That's one. And then secondly, because also um, at the end of World War II, Indonesia, as also experienced by other countries in Southeast Asia region, was occupied by the Japanese military government at that time. So the structure of the government since 1942 to Indonesia's independence in 1945 actually copies the fascism kind model from the Japanese military government. And after the independence, we copy everything from the Dutch law to the Japanese structure to the military operational model with what Isnur mentioned before, the territorial command and all that. We just copy that, continue. This is the problem of post-colonial countries, right? So we copy that, so it gets really strong. And it also has some economic power because of the territorial authorities. So it gets really strong. And then during Suharto era, he was backed really mainly by the military. So it's like embedded in our quote unquote culture. That's why Daniel mentioned before, even civil society will say siap, which is yes, sir. Probably some will put it as joke, but I'm a little bit annoyed. Also, I actually disallow my students to say that to me. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. But that's like embedded in our society. So even in every political events, including presidential election, Indonesians would always consider, so who is from the military will run? Who is backed by the military? We always have these thoughts. So we haven't been able to deconstruct this. So I would say if you can call it the real power, it's really going into our daily habitus. Lastly, what role can civil society play? Daniel already mentioned a lot of them. So I just probably reflect that. Thank you for asking this, because I believe that at this point, we really need international oversight. That's why I'm very happy when Ichal contacted us for this webinar. International oversight is needed because as in any authoritarian regime, I would say this is already authoritarian. Or we can call it academically as competitive authoritarianism. It's still, as if there is still democratic blanket, but inside it's authoritarianism. In this kind of uh, in this kind of government, then basically it's really challenging to have, even though we still have protests everywhere, we still have, as I mentioned before, as we speak, there are still our comrades in front of the parliament building, but it's really challenging because they're just everywhere. So we need some kind of intervention, legal or otherwise, as academic discourse and all that, from the international community, mostly also in terms of freedom of expression, because what the Indonesian civil society have until now is still, to some extent, freedom of expression to talk like this, to organize, protest, and all that. But with this new military law, I'm afraid it's really shrinking. So before we get to that point, we really need international attention to this. I understand there are many other economic issues after the Liberation Day of Donald Trump, but it hits us very much in Indonesia because the economic tension also comes together with the militarism. So yeah, over to you, Karel. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And Mr. Isnor, any thoughts on the questions mentioned?
Yeah, little because Daniel and Bifitri answer is fully covered the question, but I will add something. The first is the way of government and military uh, apa ya, response to people movement. It's similar with another country. They use term we are the agent of foreigner, the agent of USAID like that. So it's we pretend we have to careful with the support from the international mechanism, international donor, because the government will declining, will shrinking the support from the international. They are want to check and audit all of NGO since maybe like India and Philippines. Yeah. So it's happened also in Indonesia now. And the second one, it's happened during the military law process on parliament. One of campus in Bali, Udayana University, have an MOU with army. So the army now giving a red carpet to educate the students, yeah, to educate the lecture. So it's also the danger because it's like a precedence to come back Indonesia again to in Suharto era, because in Suharto era there are the term of normalization of campus life. So the lecture, the students prohibit to talk about politics, only about study. So it's we are seeing it's they're trying copying and practicing again the normalization living campus, yeah, but they talk about the politics. So me and Bivitri also join with of Indonesia on freedom of economic. We talk hard, yeah, about this. Mention about the situation is dangerous, so we need more support, more speak from academic, from the lecture, from the researcher. So not only come from the students, yeah, we need more consolidation between the campus, yeah. Also journalists, because in the last month, yeah, two journalists, for example, the assistant of chief of military and the assistant of chief of police attacking the journalists and giving a side war, yeah, to not open the data like that. So we need also consideration more from journalists and other stakeholder. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Isnor. And perhaps we'll have a second round of questions, and perhaps in the spirit of fairness, it will be Mr. Isnor who will take the first question. So we have two more questions here, and perhaps I'll ask the panelists to provide a closing remark before we conclude. So we have one question. So two questions. We wanted to ask about the lunch program issue, which has always been mentioned with regard to, the expansion of militarization, military control, or in Indonesia's governance. No, and what government as in justifying these military placements in very in these kinds of projects or initiatives, no? And secondly, how is the role of military? How the role of the military will be after this law takes in effect? Because the military also enters several police domains, whether later with the passing of the revision of the police law makes them clash, or the police are under the military. And finally, I think we have another question that managed to catch. How do the public and civil society respond to the revision of the military law, especially regarding concerns about the return of the dual function roles for the military? And what are the steps being taken to address these concerns? Meanwhile, we know that Indonesia is a democratic country which should pay attention to and involve civil society. In the round of question, I'll ask Mr. Isnor to please first. Thank you. You have the floor, Mr. Isnor.
Yeah. In our communication between activists in Jakarta and lots of area Indonesia, we consider we have to more and more communication between each other, because the movement usually connecting in little circle. But with social media, now we have a new experience when the movement happen with leading by narration, with leading by issue. So, for example, in some of a movement, huge movement in Indonesia, handling with a lot of actor in social media and connecting each other. For example, during the protest of military law, more than 73 cities have a demonstration. So interesting with the new method of young movement. But when there are demonstration and the police and military present on the field, and they repression and torture the people, to torture the students, they need support from us, not only legal support, but also medic and psychological support, and also a lot of attacking by digital media. So now we need more comprehensive protection for the people for the future, because the attempt, the attacking from the violator, not only physically, not only legal, but also digital. So how we can cancel, how we can detect, how we can refuse the digital operation, because the state have a big mis system. A lot of cases we bring to the police, so the police not process our reporting. So we need more also have a capacity to covering to cover up, to open up the who and why they can digital attack to activists. So we need share learning each other from the other country, from the other region, from another country, like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Isnor. And then Professor Vivici.
Okay. First, there is a question about the justification for the free meal program. Well, I should mention here also for like an alert for everyone that Indonesia also has a law number 23 of 2019. It's called National Resources Management for State Defense. Undang-Undang Pengelolaan Sumber Daya Nasional untuk Pertahanan. I hope that's a correct translation. National Resources Management for State Defense. But the problem with the law is it gives way to have komponen cadangan, to have military component in a number of government projects, and even they can mobilize. That's why they call it national resources management. So they can mobilize civilians for state defense. That's basically what the title tells us. So with that as the legal basis, they can put military personnel in a number of government projects, including the free meal program. And also, as I mentioned before, the national strategic projects. And probably you have heard before that, for example, in Papua, we have the food estate project by the government, and it's mostly conducted by the armed forces. So they actually became farmers already, and they became nutritionists, and they became anything they want. So that's why it's going everywhere. And so that's the justification, the legal justification. And that's the problem in Indonesia, because we have very strong legalism. That's why it's also very good ground, I mean good in their eyes, for autocratic legalism. Because whenever an action is legalized, um, in the eyes of the government and also the society in general, they are correct. So they have that legal basis to go everywhere. So if the question is how do then we have to react about the dual function, you're right that nowadays in Indonesia, what's going on is as if the society has only quote unquote two options, whether we want to have the police everywhere or we want to have the military everywhere, because the police is also in reality everywhere, in the ministries everywhere, heads of the regions, and also governors and all that. So as if, again, I have to underline the words, as if Indonesia has to choose whether we want to have the police or we want to have the military. I would say we don't want to have any of them. We want pure civilian government, because we are democratic government with rule of law, right? I mean, it's clear in the constitution. But I'm saying that because then now after this storm of military law, we also have to be ready with the revision to the police law on police force, which will also take place very soon. So so if the question is what we have to do, I would say we have to see it in the first technocratic way. And second, I don't know how to term it correctly, but I would say, let's say, a revolutionary way. By a technocratic way, I mean we have to still protest against the military revision to the military law, which is not yet enacted. And then we have to be ready for the police law and also the criminal procedural law, which might give more authorities to the police. And then we have to also strengthen our oversight um, on the execution of the military law, because they will have government regulations and presidential regulations, all those lower level regulations that usually contains many things that we don't want to have. And they can do it, more freely, even because it's not in the parliament building, but only by the government. So we have to strengthen that, and also going to the constitutional court. We also have to be aware that there's also a constitutional court petition already by a military general who is also a professor, um, that wants to have even more revision to the military law through the constitutional court, to even allow them to have any civilian position and to enter economic aspects in our country. Um, and also, that's why I mentioned the previous law, we also have to prevent the National Resources Management for State Defense law to be revised. Because I heard from the journalists that it's also in the list to be revised very soon. And I'm afraid they will put even more, I don't know, like I mentioned before, the Udayana University case, and also the state defense classes in universities. They might even want to have more than that, because the state defense classes are also legalized by this law 23 of 2019 that I mentioned before. And the revolutionary way, I just call it that way, to say that we have to be ready for some like a bigger context in terms of the change of actors. Because as much as we can do the technocratic advocacy, it's really challenging as long as we have a general who has very bad human rights violation track record as our president. I mean, I don't know how else I can express that, but please do not forget that. So it's really challenging. So we have to think now about preparing ourselves for the future in terms of changing the actors, even for 2029. Who will be the next president and what legacy he or she has to deal with and all that. So yeah, so that's also my closing remarks. Thank you, Karel.
Thank you very much, Professor Vivici, and Mr. Daniel, for your responses and closing remarks as well.
Yeah, I think some of the concern already been very good answered by all of my fellow uh, panel. So I'd like to giving a bit like a kind of respond to the last one, that how are we going to do together, yeah, especially on responding the dual function. Our position still the same, that the dual function is never disappeared in our arrangement, in our society arrangement, even after reformation under currently, and then remilitarization still happening, as well as also now completely legalized, yeah. So from illegal or informal becoming somewhat legal under this law. So just recently adopted or enacted. I also agree with Professor Wifitri saying that this is full, yeah, an action. Apparently, there has been a lot of case that I got, recently this morning. Also got there is a YouTuber getting taken down the content just because they are discussing about the revision of this law. So while we thought the greater role on dealing with the cyber is on the defense purpose, but apparently is trying to control those who somehow against with the interests of the militaries. For instance, we don't know. It's still an assumption because we never know who the one who tried to dox or trying to attacking in some digital platform. So it is something that also becoming our concern. And again, it is really jeopardizing our movement under the coalition of security sector reform, that we even trying to removing the territorial command of military. It's not just basically like the all military. If I have to be specific, it is an army basically. It's an army. If we look at the posture or the data of the military, that needs to be like maybe strengthened, maybe navy or some other matra needs to be added. But this is really army that following the decentralization, especially in the conflicted areas such as Papua. They open up some more territorial command, yeah, and we mentioned and discussed earlier, even until village level, how we can how to that solve some issues that is really heavily and people really having serious issues with the presence of military. So by that, I think our call in this occasion, I think the dual function, if even proudly mentioned by several military actors during Jokowi era, the retired government supported them, and now the currently they even proudly say that in multi functions of military personnel. So I think we have to always put military on the defense purpose only. That's only our removing them on the political arrangement and making them professional, not get involved in the dealing with the business. That's it. We have to always admire supporting a provisional militarism, but not militarism. I stop here and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel. Thank you very much to our speakers. So I would like to conclude by saying that militarization and securitized governance is nothing new to Asia. Countries which underwent the third wave of democratization in the 1980s which fought martial law regimes, and this includes Indonesia, can attest to the existential challenge of militarization to civic space. The advent of an era of chaos is upon us, unfortunately. We have geopolitical disputes, climate change, the emergence of pandemics, and the economic crisis that we're in. And it has resurrected, unfortunately, a trend of militarization. And this comes at the advent of a new set of populist, autocratic, strongman leaders that we have at the present. This, however, does not justify military incursions in civilian affairs, most especially when democratic processes are still working and in effect. Partnered with the real foul legislative processes, bringing about draconian policies, this makes the advancement of autocratization faster, challenging civilian supremacy and putting us at the trend of governance that controls how we express, associate, and assemble. And even at the possibility of putting leaders in power. This calls for our vigilance against policies like the revised military law and the foul and democratic legislative processes which bring them about. Let us thank our speakers for providing us their thoughts on why we have to move and respond as democracy advocates. So if you like this discussion, this is the first of a series of ADN's democracy updates. In the future, we will be tackling similarly important issues which impact democratization in Asia. Furthermore, ADN will also co-host with Civicus, the International Civil Society Week 2025, happening in November 1 to 5 in Bangkok, Thailand, which will also serve as a medium for dialogue and finding pathways to advance democracy in Asia. For more information, visit us at adnasia.org and our social media. Again, this is Karel. Thank you everyone for listening and joining us in this very important discussion. And see you again soon in another iteration of the Asia Democracy Update. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, speakers.
Thank you, Baichal. Thank you,
Okay,
Karel.
bye.